All right, I've been given the green light from Maya. We are live on Facebook. So we'll start again. Good morning, everyone. It's January 21st, and this is the City and County of Honolulu Climate Change Commission. Happy New Year. This is our first meeting of the year. So we're going to get started. Maya, could you help us with roll call, please? Okay, so Maya said her mic's not working. So okay, thank you, Director Sullivan.
Commissioner Islam,
Present.
Chair Islam, Vice Chair Otsuka,
Here.
Commissioner Olson,
Present.
Commissioner Roman.
Present.
All current commissioners are here. Chair, it's back to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Director Sullivan. Commissioners present, and we have quorum. Great, so we can move on to our first agenda item, which is approval of our meeting minutes from October 25th. That was included in the board packet and released out to the public. I want to ask the commissioners if there's any questions or changes that need to be made to these meeting minutes. All right, seeing none, could I get a motion, please?
I move to approve the minutes.
Thank you, Commissioner Olson. Is there a second?
Second that.
Thank you, Commissioner Romine. All in favor, say aye or raise your hand. Great, all in favor. The meeting minutes from October 25th, 2024 pass. Great, we're just moving right along. Now we're going to move over to Director Sullivan for some updates from the Office of Climate Change, Sustainability, and Resiliency.
Chair Islam, I'll be brief. There's a lot on your agenda today, but I'm really thankful for the opportunity. It's great to see the commission again. It's been a while. Our last meeting was in October, and I will say as an opener that quite a lot has happened. So I think we all are aware that we're still continuing to see climate disasters, both here and around the world, and we're all reflecting on and motivated by that and understanding that the more we do today, the better off we're going to be tomorrow, both for ourselves and for our communities and those who really struggle, regardless of what's happening in the broader political world, to make ends meet at home. So a couple of notes, the election brought some positive and some challenging news in November. The really positive news that I'd really like to spend a minute on before I get to the other is the voters of the City and County of Honolulu passed the Climate Resiliency Fund, which is really a very critical step in moving towards more clarity and more transparency and planning an opportunity for the city to really lead and show all the great work we're already doing with climate action, both climate mitigation and climate adaptation. So we are working hard internally with the administration to begin to define that. We've also begun conversations with city council members on the subject, and we're really, really excited to determine how this tool can really help advance our work and that of all the departments in the city to advance climate action across the board. So Climate Resiliency Fund, really positive. In other news, the change in administration in DC has led to some challenges, certainly. We have in the Office of Climate Change, Sustainability, and Resiliency a number of grants that are climate change related, and we are working hard to assure that these grants are obligated to the extent possible and that all the work is continuing to move forward. However, there have been some executive orders that have put some of these funding sources in jeopardy. And so again, we are looking to move as quickly as we can to secure all these resources and really just continue the work on behalf of the people of the City and County of Honolulu. So really thankful to the team here in CCSR for all the great work they're doing on all these fronts. Next thing I want to touch on, Chair, is really just to comment on how important our team is and the people in this office to get this work done. So you may recall we were advertising for 3 open specialist positions last time we all met. I'm really, really happy to report that with the help of new Deputy Director, Kealoha Fox, the team has done a great job and recruited 3 new specialists. We're very, very excited to have them coming on board on February 3rd. all together as a class, and we'll be bringing them in and welcoming to the office. And we are confident they are going to add tremendous value to the team that is already here. So very, very exciting. We are also continuing to advertise for an administrative assistant. So if anybody who's not afraid of my inbox wants to volunteer and come forward, we are welcoming those applications. A couple more things I want to mention on the news front. So the Supreme Court made a really, really pivotal decision in the city and county's lawsuit against the oil companies who have and really who have represented that their product, failed to warn that their product potentially had damages associated with climate change. The Supreme Court made the determination that the case should stay in the state of Hawaii and not be brought to federal court, which is something that is a real win for the voters and for the people of the city and county of Honolulu, so that we can begin to really protect ourselves and our taxpayers from the immense costs and consequences of the climate crisis. So really, really an important moment for that. A couple other things that I'm going to touch on as related to the agenda, actually. So we're really excited for Monique Schaefer's presentation on decarbonization and buildings. And I will say that in relation to that, the city has, as you know, a really robust program on building benchmarking that is going very strongly. So the building benchmarking program is entering its third year this year, and that will mean incorporation of buildings 25,000 square feet and larger. The team led by Marissa Kunch, our energy program manager, has done a wonderful job for the first 2 years, and the next class of buildings, which is just completing their logging into the system and reporting on energy and water use. That building data will be mapped by the end of February, and the next class, again, 25,000 square feet and up, will be due in June. Really, really excited about the work that Hawaii State Energy Office is doing to take our lead on benchmarking and take it further into building performance standards. And I'm hoping that Monique can talk about that a little. We're standing by to support as appropriate with that. Some of the other things I wanted to touch on, but again, want to be brief here. So we are really excited about, sorry, lost my place in my notes. How embarrassing. We are really excited about the presentation that Alex Yee, our adaptation program manager, is going to provide on cool Oahu and heat mortality. And we all recognize the importance of this work, both in the outdoor environment and to the built environment in terms of constructed buildings, and all the work that the commission and others are doing to really help us understand how we can mitigate these risks. So really tremendous opportunities across the board. I'm going to stop there because there's really so much, again, on the agenda for the commission. And the office's work is tremendous, and we really appreciate everybody across the team. And we're let's get into the agenda and hear more about that now. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Director Sullivan. As always, excellent updates. You just kind of zip through them. I love it. Bursts of content. I just want to congratulate everyone on the passing of the Climate Resiliency Fund. That is something tremendous for our city. So as your office continues to work with council members and the like, please let us know if there is any way in which the commission can support some of this work. And then also big thanks to Deputy Director Fox for joining the office and for your support in filling the team. It is so great to kind of reconnect with you within the Resiliency Office and just sort of see the work continue. So I'm happy to hear that a new cohort will be joining in February and hoping to meet them soon. And that's kind of all my brief. I think, again, like you, echoing sort of looking forward to the content in today's agenda, particularly on the discussion of buildings and heat. I do believe there are some synergies that we can look forward to and start discussing as we move through the year. I want to open it up to commissioners to see if there are any comments or questions that you'd like to share to Director Sullivan. Please feel free to unmic and or raise your hand. Commissioner Romine.
Thanks, Ben, for all those updates, and all the great work continues to go on in that office. And yeah, it's great to hear about all the new hires to the team, including Dr. Fox here in recent couple months, and then more recently. And yeah, thanks for the reminder, the good news about the passing of the Climate Resiliency Fund. Wonder if you could tell us just kind of order of magnitude, what kind of funding would be available through that in the coming years?
Absolutely happy to share that. So the charter amendment proposed that was passed proposes 0.5% of real property tax revenue. And so that comes to currently about $8.5 million per year.
Great. Thank you.
Great. Any other questions, Commissioner Romine? Okay. Any other
Commi-
commissioners? Go ahead,
I may,
Director
if I may,
Sullivan.
Chair, really to expand on that response. So the city is already doing a tremendous amount of work on climate adaptation and mitigation. And so this fund is really a way, again, to really target some discussions and some more transparency and process around where and how those things are being spent. And we see it as a really great opportunity to engage more broadly with the public about what the priorities of the city are with regards to these efforts. So it's, you know, the fund itself does not create new money in the sense that it's taking from an existing revenue source and dedicating it. And certainly there are that much and more efforts already ongoing with the city to expend and to prepare ourselves for climate change. But again, the opportunity here is really the demarcation and the potential flexibility of this fund relative to other funds, as well as really just the overall process of engaging both with administration and with council and with you and the public about how do we move this opportunity forward? How do we expand on the use of these funds? How do we leverage these funds in light of, you know, the challenges we're facing with federal funding and others? So thanks again for the question.
Thank you, Director Sullivan. Any other commissioners, comments and/or questions?
I'll just add that I'm thrilled that you managed to hire 3 people, and I really look forward to working with them and seeing what they bring to the to the office. And yes, and also congratulations to Dr. Fox. Also excited to work with you in your new capacity.
Great. Thank you, Commissioner Olson. Vice Chair Otsuka?
Commissioner Olson stole the words out of my mouth. I just also wanted to say how thrilled I am to have Dr. Fox in the CCSR office in a capacity in the office, although we miss her as a commissioner. And I got the chance to meet some of the new CCSR staff last week. They were all really great. So I'm really excited for your office, Ben, and the work that we can do together.
Great. Well, thank you, everyone. With that, it looks like our next presenters are online. So we're going to proceed to item number 5, which is a presentation on decarbonization, energy efficiency, and the important role of buildings. So I'd like to welcome Monique Schaefer and Ron Chatterjee from the Hawaii State Energy Office.
Aloha, thank you so much. Should I go ahead and share my screen, or do you guys have slides up? Okay.
Please, yes, share your screen, Monique. Thank you.
All right. And are you able to see it?
Not yet.
Oh, there we go.
There we go.
Okay, perfect.
Great.
Hi, everyone. My name is Monique Schaefer. I am the Decarbonization Program Manager here at the Hawaii State Energy Office. I'm joined by my colleague, Ron, who I will let introduce later in the presentation. And we both I work on the higher level decarbonization, and Ron is definitely the expert in energy efficiency in buildings. Starting off at a very high, broad level, I think a lot of you folks know the state as well as the city has a mandated net negative emissions target. Really just demonstrating here, we've been on a fairly flat trajectory really since the 90s, since before then, for our emissions. And changing those emissions is going to require a dramatic shift in how we, have different technologies as well as behavioral switches. It's not going to be easy to get there. It's going to require a lot of change. The shift's dramatic, but I also like to remind folks that our targets are in line with the Paris Climate Accord and the Paris Climate Agreement. This is core to what we do and what we need to do. And I really think importantly, and I know I'm likely speaking to the choir, but very important to remember that for these nationally determined contributions, which our targets are modeled off after, to work, they have to be widely understood by governments, businesses, civil society, so all levels of government down to the individual, down to private businesses, etc. So where are we today? We do a state inventory. So these are our emissions from the 2021 emissions inventory statewide. Most of our emissions do come from the energy sector. That's about 87%. In that sector, the largest emission source is stationary combustion. So that is our power plants. And the largest user of electricity in the state is buildings. So reducing building demand and energy demand in buildings is really key to driving down our emissions. Just following up, after stationary combustion, it's aviation and then ground transportation. So there we go. Energy efficiency is core to reducing our building demand. We use different models to account for how we do our, how far we can go, how far energy efficiency can take us. So back in 2020, the Hawaii Public Utilities Commission released their market potential study, which looked at all of the different demands across the state of Hawaii. And using different models, they estimated different levels of energy efficiency. These really build out how they're the foundation for our future energy projections. And as you'll see in the next slide, we use different assumptions when we did our state decarb strategy, which we published in 2023. So it's about at its year, December 2023. So it's at about its year anniversary. So different levels of energy efficiency include the technical potential, and that's the highest level. That's how far technology can take us. And it assumes that customers adopt all feasible measures regardless of cost or preference. After that is economic potential. So that includes only cost-effective measures, and customers are assumed to purchase the most cost-effective option. So this is, as I'll show in the next slide, the highest level of energy efficiency that we modeled. Following economic potential is achievable potential, which is a subset of economic potential, and it accounts for likely customer adoption. And there's two sort of levels. There's the business as usual, so that is following our current sort of market trends for adoption, inclusive of our energy efficiency portfolio standard, extending that out. And then the high includes expanded programs, including adoption of new codes and standards and future market improvements. So, for folks not familiar with our decarbonization strategy, the strategy used 3 different scenarios that backcasted basically all of the different plethora of options to get to our net negative target. In order to do so, we need to electrify things. So we have to account for electricity demand. And what you see here is that, in 2019, buildings make up the largest portion of the electricity demand. Statewide, there is a little bit of industrial consumption as well. But again, it's really those buildings. So when we adopted sort of that high level of aggressive EE or energy efficiency options, we actually saw our overall electric load go down and go down quite substantially. This, I like to say, it translates to the amount of generation build out we have to do. So we have to do our renewable portfolio standards. But if we adopt more energy efficiency, it means, you know, less land is taken for solar, less costs associated with more generation. So it's really, really critical that we use our resources wisely, because it means less resources on the generation side. When we adopt, you know, less aggressive energy efficiency measures, you know, the achievable potential high, there's a little bit of demand reduction, but there's not quite so much demand reduction. And then, of course, the yellow is adoption of electric vehicles. So significant growth in electrical demand is anticipated as we electrify, but we can counteract that with some efficiency in our buildings. This is a groundbreaker. I mean, we did all of these models and what we found is kind of common sense. Most efficient pathway is also the most cost-effective pathway. So when you adopt really efficient sort of policies and options, you end up with cost savings over the forecasted time from 2019 to 2045 was our sort of model years, and really the only scenario that resulted in cost savings was the most efficient scenario, and that is really accounted for with fuel cost savings. So there were some recommendations from the report, and I just want to highlight a few of them focused really on energy efficiency. You know, we did recommend to extend, update, and strengthen any supportive policy for energy efficiency, including net zero ready energy, building energy codes, building performance standards, as well as adoption and encouragement in the utility of grid interactive and grid flexible appliances in buildings. We also think it's important for the states to do our part, lead by example, and focus on any energy use reductions in the state. I can tell you now, my office has fluorescent light bulbs. I would love to see those go at some point to LEDs. And then, you know, also buy clean policies that favor low carbon options. And again, this is all about cost-effective decarbonization, reducing. It's also really important to note that all of these things have other co-benefits. So energy smart buildings do reduce total costs over time of ownership and reduce mortgage default rates. So there might be higher investment up front, but it is important to note that over the life there is cost savings. And, you know, reduced energy use, as I referenced before, does reduce capital expenditures for generation and delivery infrastructure, which we know is not cheap. Gonna hand it over to Ron, who is gonna go into the details of some of the actions we are taking here at the State Energy Office to promote energy efficiency.
Mahalo, Monique. Would you be okay with just advancing the slides for me? If that's okay?
Yes. Yep.
Awesome. Thank you. Hello, everyone. So I'm Ron Chatterjee. I'm an energy efficiency specialist with the Hawaii State Energy Office. I have the pleasure of working on some of the building policies here. And I'm just going to take Monique's last slide, which was the recommendations from the DCARB report, and talk through what we have been doing to try and meet some of those recommendations. So I'll start off with building energy codes. Energy codes remain the primary policy lever we have to reduce demand and emissions from our building sector. You'll see the two charts here. One's from USDOE, just showing their incremental reductions in energy usage per their different codes, the 90.1 for commercial buildings and the IECC for residential, as they try to get to net zero by 2030. They are currently on the right path to get there. The other chart you'll notice is from AIA's Architecture 2030 Challenge. And I just want to highlight that a lot of architecture firms nationwide have recognized that the sort of stall in progress over the last several years is primarily driven by the energy code stringency nationwide. Ultimately, most energy efficient buildings, they are determined determination of how energy efficient they are is by the energy codes. And a lot of states are just not at that point of stringency yet, where architects can keep seeing continual growth in efficiency measures for their buildings. So HSCO is committed to collaborating on future codes statewide with all of the counties as needed. We are, of course, going to stay in line with the governor's priorities on housing affordability, and we have taken a very sort of on-demand technical assistance role with all of the counties. If they choose to want to advance their codes in the current situation, we're going to do everything in our power to help them out in any way possible. I also just want to mention that we were able to secure about $7.3 million via the DOE's IRA grants for the advancement of energy codes, and specifically for the adoption of net zero ready codes. Half of these funds are obligated for the localities, so each county gets a portion of half of that 7.3 million. And our office is committed to continuing providing energy code training to both the public and the private sectors, regardless of this fund. And I'll touch on why in just a little bit. Next slide, please. So the next recommendation I want to quickly touch on was regarding grid interactive and grid flexible buildings. So another partnership that we've been able to sign on to recently is with the New Buildings Institute to develop grid interactive stretch codes, or just code suggestions for Climate Zone 1A buildings. So Climate Zone 1A is us and like 2 more jurisdictions nationwide. I think it's Miami-Dade County and like a little tiny bit of Texas somewhere. So in order to spread the awareness a little bit, we've also partnered with Puerto Rico and the Marianas Islands. And the goal of this project is to have several pilot projects around Honolulu County. And we're going to be using NBI and USGBC's Grid Optimal Buildings Initiative, which seeks to shift building demand during less carbon-intensive grid time periods. And I see Chair Islam is here. We're actually hoping to work with one of her projects on this. So we're very excited about this. And NBI hopes to kick this off sometime next month. Next slide, please. All right. Going to talk a little bit about building performance standards that Director Sullivan mentioned earlier in the call. We are very excited to kick off this project. It is sort of taking a subset of the city and county's benchmarking policy. It's not directed at as many buildings. So our threshold for buildings is about 50,000 square feet and above. And the types of buildings is a much narrower scope. So it's targeted at the most high emission buildings in our state. We put a proposal together that I was able to lead. It's been an honor to do that for the office, and we have been awarded $18.1 million by USDOE. And we hope to kick this off sometime soon. Next slide, please. I'll just give you a quick overview of kind of what we're thinking about this. It's a 9-year program that will be hopefully starting out sometime this year. Currently, no one in the state has jurisdiction to implement a policy of this nature. So the first thing that we have to do is to pass a law at the legislature. That's our goal for the first 2 years while we create the details of the policy itself. we'll be doing a lot of community engagement and building support within the legislature to try and pass this bill either next leg session or the session after that. Following that, there's going to be about 3 years of voluntary compliance period to sort of provide a glide path onto compliance. We're only going to be requiring some benchmarking during that time, just so that we can start getting more data on buildings statewide and not just within Honolulu County. And phase 3 kicks off in 2031. That's when the first set of buildings, which is going to be the largest buildings, would have to comply with this. We're going to be working on targets based on the ASHRAE Standard 100, the 2024 version. And there's going to be a tiered approach to which buildings have to comply at what time. So very excited about this. Next slide, please. So the last thing I'll touch on is sort of the lead by example recommendation that Monique talked about. So HCO, again, via the Inflation Reduction Act, we were able to secure about $1.6 million for the Energy Efficiency and Conservation Block Grant, also known as EECBG. And our plans for this fund is to benchmark about 570 state buildings. I believe the contract for that just got signed, so that should be kicking off sometime soon. We're also doing a much bigger sort of retrofit strategy for 6 different state facilities that have the highest possibility for increased energy savings. And I believe we just signed the contract with HDR for that this week, so that should be kicking off sometime soon too. And lastly, I want to mention that we're also using this fund to continue energy code compliance training, both for the public and the private sector. Primarily because the EECBG funding is already in our hands and we're able to use this money. Whereas the other funds that I've mentioned so far, although they are obligated to the state based on the most recent executive orders, most likely there are going to be some delays before we're actually able to get our hands on that funding. However, we are very optimistic as the contracts have been signed with the federal government. That money is obligated for the state of Hawaii, and we hopefully will still be able to get our hands on that. And I think that's it. Happy to answer any questions.
Great. Thank you so much, Monique and Ron, for sort of a presentation on the state's work on decarbonization and some detailed work, particularly on the energy efficiency and the supportive funding that the office has been receiving or will be receiving soon. I want, Monique, I wanted to just touch upon, I loved your diagram, which kind of pointed out sort of the 4 levels of how we can kind of begin to reduce our emissions, right? Right now, our industry, I think, has really been looking at, I think, a combination of continuing status quo because of economics. And so I think it's great that you point out that, like, if we begin to adopt all the new technologies out there, we could begin to ramp up faster, right? But I think the big push in this near term is how do we move our market, both private and public, out of the standard quo into sort of having, I would say, a bit more risk, right, in recognizing some state and county level goals. So thank you for pointing that piece out. I also wanted to sort of like briefly touch upon the work that you talked about, Ron, as it relates to energy efficiency and the code updates. Given the current sort of EP from the governor, I'm quite curious what movement you think the state and the counties can make in terms of advancing energy codes. That really is a place in which we need to live, right, if we want to meet our targets. And I will contest what we have found nationally from the AIA 2030 reporting, and that's been occurring over the last 20 plus years, is that we are stagnant at 50% predicted energy use reduction. And that's very much because either a balance of economics or really that, both state and county codes are not moving forward, right? The most we're really seeing is a 40% reduction. So there needs to be, I think, larger levers either coming from the private or the public sector to move that forward. But I will share that the Institute is looking at other ways of how we can kind of make this reporting, because right now the Architecture 2030 is looking at operational emissions, but have to look at more holistically at total sort of building, right, emissions, total carbon, which touches upon sort of the buy clean and the zero carbon aspect. I think it's great that you highlight that, but as an island community, we have some challenges when we look at sort of total carbon. So I know it's the sort of charge is probably in the infancy, but I'm quite curious sort of how the state begins to classify low carbon products for our communities, given the challenges of what we produce and given sort of the geographic distances or what have you. So I know there's a lot of questions sort of baked in there, but I guess the first one really is what broader roles can intersection between the state and counties have to pushing code adoption forward in this current government climate. And then secondly, I think just looking forward on sort of the total embodied carbon component of the low carbon products.
Sure. Thank you, Chair Islam. Yeah, so regarding your question on code updates, given the current emergency proclamations, right? So the Energy Office cannot, there is no building code council right now, essentially. So there will be no, this is just guaranteed, there will be no changes in the state energy code for the foreseeable future. As far as we know, it could be the next 6 years, it could continue forever, essentially. However, our office does have a statutory obligation to advance energy codes. And so what we have been directed to do is reach out to the counties and ask them how we can support them best. And we've been in discussion with Director Sullivan's team. We actually just talked to the Public Works team at Maui County yesterday. I hope to talk to Hawaii County next week. And what we are able to do is primarily through that $7.3 million fund, half of that money going to the counties. We're starting the conversation there. We recognize that there's permitting difficulties everywhere. And we also recognize that most of the counties have their own specific climate goals, and they're not exactly wanting to just stay stagnant on these codes. The codes have a lot of repercussions to them, whether it be the IRC and IBC and FEMA money involved with those, or just the energy codes themselves and how much energy burden some of our communities see with their energy bills. So what we have suggested to the counties is that typically the SBCC does a lot of the technical work, and the counties don't necessarily have the capacity. All the counties don't have that capacity to do that work, right? So we are suggesting to them that, we'll take on that role if you request it from us. We are allowed per our office's statutes to assist in any way that we can. And our CEO, Mark Blick, has made that clear that we should be assisting the counties if they ask that of us. And so that's how we're approaching this. And most of the counties want to get this done. We've started the discussion of leapfrogging to the 2024 set of codes instead of moving to the next one, which would have been the 21 set of codes. The hope there is that we can have a longer time slot of having to jump to the next code past that, so it can help out both the permitting officials as well as the design community a little bit. And so we have some plans. We're going to try and set up a technical advisory group outside of the SBCC, and we're going to ask for their help. It's going to be made up of industry peers, and we'll do the drafting of these codes for the counties, take into account what their input is and help them get these codes across and funnel this money to them how they see best use is for their particular needs. So that's what we're going to do for the codes, at least. It's early times, but we're very hopeful that this can still work. And from what I've seen, there's enthusiasm from all of the counties to make that happen. Regarding your second question on the embodied carbon policies, I think what we really need to do is have a lot more collaboration with other agencies regarding this. I've been involved with code development in Washington State before, and no matter how much we've tried, including embodied carbon related policies within the energy code has always failed. So what we would like to try instead is something like what California has done with their Cal Green Code. And there's actually a bill in the state ledge right now for asking the state to develop its own sustainability building code of that nature. So that's going to require some collaboration both across state agencies. So HSEO would have to, try and work with, I'm guessing like DAGs and maybe HIEMA a little bit, but also across the counties. Like you said, there's a lot of challenges for us being in an island state with costs for these low carbon options. So I think it's going to take a lot of work, but the primary thing we need is a lot of collaboration cross agency and cross government levels, I guess. I don't think that conversation has progressed too far just yet, but we are hopeful that we can start that and get some traction going.
And I can add just a little bit on the BiClean. It's very much in its infancy, but we did get some technical assistance to start sort of framing out what that is, and that technical assistance is from the U.S. Climate Alliance. So it's very much in its infancy, but it is something we are working towards.
Great. Thank you, Ron and Monique. I'm really excited just going on the codes to hear Hawaii State Energy Office, sort of extending the reach to the counties. And what I think I heard correctly is potentially development of a TAG, a technical assistance group to help with sort of energy code adoption. Particularly Honolulu has made a lot of efforts. Ben shared, Director Sullivan shared earlier, they're in the third year benchmarking to at least start to understand energy, right, emissions performance of their buildings. And so it would be great to sort of see Honolulu kind of push forward on that, also given the fact that we have the largest building stock in the state, right, and therefore the largest emissions reduction potential possible. So we'll very much like to sort of track how that's moving forward, and outside of this commission would like to extend that I think AIA would love to be part of that sort of support if in any way possible. Just given the fact that we do have Architecture 2030 commitment firms, so we are reporting our buildings. So if anything, we can provide real life information on the predicted use performance, energy use performance of our buildings. Regarding the BiClean and the carbon, I don't know if you have looked into it yet, but with the IRA funding, GSA has been requiring the use of kind of low carbon products. We have dived into that really much further, right? And really a lot of their study is predicated on continent-based products, continent-based projects. But that might be an interesting starting point because they do have, the global warming potential range built into there. I don't know what factor they have considered for the transport and fuel factor to Honolulu and to Hawaii. That might be an interesting starting point. I do also want to share that the Carbon Leadership Forum might also be a good resource for you to look at. They have developed a lot of products for the AEC community, at least to understand the EPDs and the LCA sort of cycle and disclosures of our products that we bring in. And then lastly, maybe the County of Santa Monica, that may be something else the commission can look in further. They have some low carbon policies, particularly to concrete. And I know that's kind of an industry that we work in here. So, but I'm just really excited to hear this. I think it really just speaks to that there needs to be more direct relationships and synergy between all parties really to kind of move forward both state and county goals. So thank you, Monique and Ron, for this great presentation. I'm going to stop talking now and open it up to the other commissioners for their comments and thoughts. Please feel free to unmic and share your thoughts. Thank you so much. Okay, Vice Chair Osuga.
I don't have much to add. I just want to thank you both so much for presenting, and I'm really happy to hear that we have a resource such as your office to support some of this really technical work. And it's really great to see how much federal grants you folks have brought in to support this work. I know it's not cheap, and I look forward to hearing more from you folks when we start working on implementation and how we best support communities that are economically challenged in this transition. So I just want to say thank you.
Thank you, Vice Chair Osuga. I'll go to Commissioner Romine and then Commissioner Olson.
Oh, I saw Commissioner Olson's hand go up first.
Okay.
Okay, I don't mind. Thank you so much for this presentation. It was a fire hose of really fantastic information, and I hope we'll get your slides so we can digest some of this in the future. I did have a couple of just thoughts, and again, I may have missed this, but I'm based at the University of Hawaii. We are a state institution, and I know we're a massive energy consumer. So I'm wondering how you're engaging with the university system. So that's first thing, and or whether there are opportunities to do that and increase our or decrease our footprint and increase our energy efficiency. And secondly, I was also similar to Commissioner Otsuka, encouraged by kind of the systems thinking of like everything's interconnected. And I'm wondering how you're connecting with like the water utilities and the energy required for the water distribution, wastewater disposal, et cetera, which I imagine is a win-win situation if we can keep more water on the landscape and less disposal into the ocean and also preserve energy. So any thoughts you have on that, I would really appreciate.
Sure, yeah, of course. UH is a very valuable collaborator for us actually on a lot of these things. Two of those projects that I mentioned, firstly, the BPS, UH is actually going to be a big part of that. We've allocated about $2 million of funding that's going to be going towards UH, and both the Sea Grant and the College of Architecture is a part of that effort. They're going to be helping us with the education and outreach, as well as some of the early modeling for some of the BPS related policies. So really looking forward to that. And they're also involved with the NBI grant that's doing the grid flexible appliances, primarily looking at water heating because that's a large energy draw typically for residential applications. And so UH is a part of that as well. And this tag that we're hoping to create, we are hoping that UH will have the capacity to kind of assist us with some of that as well. My personal view is that the university has, a name for itself, essentially, that is respected. And if they are able to assist us in code provisions, I think that just helps with the legitimacy of what we're trying to do. So very much looking forward to working with UH in the future on all of these grants. Regarding your question on water, I'm not sure too much about what we're doing about wastewater related stuff. Maybe Monique can help me out a little bit there, but I will mention in regards to water conservation within the building sector, again, codes play a valuable part in this, both advancing our plumbing code so that there is less water wasted, whether it be in terms of pipe sizing and also energy savings because of how much of a pipe run you have that needs to first, be drawn out before you can have access to any hot water, what type of hot water heating systems you have, whether that be, electric resistance or like a heat pump system that is several times more efficient. These are the kind of things that we can influence with these codes. We don't need to mandate the use of any of these technologies, but we can definitely write the codes in a way that incentivizes certain technologies over others, just based on their efficiency and nothing else. So that's the primary way that I have always thought about water conservation in terms of the energy nexus for buildings. But as we try to develop more of like a CalGreen style sustainability code, there's more opportunity there as well to have heightened water savings related provisions included in there. So lots of possibility. Codes are definitely a good start, and we can definitely do a lot more, and I hope we can.
Yeah, and just I want to make sure we answer your question. I think Ron covered it for the building side far better than I can. and I can follow up on this because I'm not totally sure the status, but I do know like water pumping, it's actually really important for resilience, to make sure, pump stations are adequately powered. So I do believe we are working on some programs that are helping with the generation, renewable generation for pump stations. So that is good for resilience and for energy generation. Not sure on
Thank you very
wastewater.
much.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks,
Great.
Monique and Ron, for your presentation. I hope we can get your slide deck after the meeting. I don't think it was shared beforehand. Really appreciate that if we can.
I do think we sent it.
Oh.
So you should have I think we sent it to Maya late. So not her
Okay.
fault that it wasn't posted.
No worries. It'll probably get past us eventually. Appreciate that. Just want to, first of all, I want to flag something for the commissioners. We've had some discussion on this, that the numbers that Monique presented around domestic aviation differ significantly than what's in our tourism and climate change doc. And again, this is an agenda item to come, but I just want to flag that at this time and make sure we understand our sources and just continue to work on reconciling that, understanding those different numbers. And then, lastly, most of my work is on the adaptation side. So this is one of a lot of opportunities that I really get to learn through being a member of this commission. So thank you again. So, being able to put myself kind of in the seat of more like the public perspective, and you may be doing a lot of this, I think it really is important to highlight kind of the multiple additional benefits of this energy saving measures and standards to come. And, I'm thinking around taxpayer savings, energy security and grid resilience and disaster resilience. I think that'll be really beneficial. And again, you may be doing a lot of that, and but to selling it to elected officials and the public as to why these multiple benefits may exist and why it really is important to the public. So thanks for all your hard work and the great presentation. Appreciate it.
Great. Thank you, Commissioner Romine. Director Sullivan, I just wanted to ask if your office wanted to ask any questions or comments to Monique or Ron before we open to the public.
I'm happy to, appreciate the opportunity. So a couple of things. Really, really appreciate the potential for partnership with HSEO. We're always working closely together. The work from building benchmarking into building performance standards is a natural fit, and we're excited about that. I think one of the comments I want to make that's really important for the city and county is really a reminder for myself as we have these very technical conversations that ultimately this work is about people, and I think it's really important to continue to go back to that as we look at the technical nature of this work, because really what it comes down to, whether it's about energy efficiency measures and technical ability versus marketability or other aspects of the work, codes, for example, it comes down to the relationships between people and the perception of the public and understanding of the public to be able to make these changes. Because very often when we get into these conversations about code, the perception is, hey, this is going to cost people money who are trying to put food on the table, and that conversation really dominates it as it should, right? It rightfully should be centered. And so how do we, I think to Commissioner Romine's last remark, how do we connect the technical side on the code work to the human side, and really recognize that the reason we do this is in part to reduce carbon, but really the reason we do this is to make stronger communities, make more resilient communities, more affordable communities. And so we're going to continue to emphasize that. I know that's part of what HSEO is doing as well, and really, really value that work. Their job is to really lift up on the technical side and help us to understand that so that we can make that kind of connection on the ground. So that's maybe the only big remark I have on that, but thank you for the opportunity, Chair.
Thank you, Director Sullivan, for kind of highlighting the relationship point. It's so critically important in the portability. So thank you. I want to turn it back to Commissioner Olson. You have your hand up.
Yes, I do. Yeah, I want to follow up on what Director Sullivan just said and connect it back to the $8.5 million that we're going to have, right, to really do outreach. And I hope that that will include, you know, the contractors and you know, people who are the interface between, often the interface between the public and implementing all of this, right? So speaking as someone who's thinking of renovating her house, I really get a lot of information from the contractors who come and explain things, right, to lay people like me. So I think it's going to be really important to get this information out in different avenues and very simply, because I agree with you, like the behavior change aspect of this is going to be the hard nut to crack, right?
Thank you, Commissioner.
Thank you, Commissioner Olson, for pointing that out. I think, yeah, communication about how this all translates down is critically important, and understanding where everyone is coming from, right? I do want to open it up to the public, and we have 3 venues for that. We have someone in the city's meeting room. We have individuals online who have posted comments, and we have those that are in our virtual meeting. So I'm going to first start, excuse me, with the comment that is in our chat from Facebook from Adrian. I'm just going to read the chat, and then if anyone would like to respond, Monique and Ron, that'd be great. Hi everyone, we have money so far for so many projects, but I did not see many to reforest the island. This has so many benefits, from decarbonization to carbon sequestration, balance the climate, reduce heat, balance humidity, bottom line forest in all of our lungs. More you cut deforestation, the harder to breathe. In 2023, we lost 329 hectares of natural forest, equivalent to 388 kilotons of carbon emissions on Hawaii Islands. What are the projects on this matter?
So I can speak to you know, the broader decarbonization report, and sort of it did cover what we call the agriculture, forestry, and other land use sector that is both a source category of emissions. A lot of those emissions in that sector come from fertilizer applications, so your nitrous oxides, as well as soil disturbance. You know, so implementing things like no-till agriculture. Your sinks, which this Adrian mentioned, the sink category is really critical, and a lot, as she states, a lot of the forecasts show that our sink capacity is declining. That said, you know, the State Energy Office, that isn't our primary sort of focus. That really is as a DLNR. That is the agency, the state agency responsible for our forests. And I don't want to say there's no interlinkages, because there definitely are, but I do know that DLNR is working on some programs, and there are a few recommendations in the broader decarbonization report on how we can do better for state forestry.
And I'll just add that I do believe DLNR also applied for and received several IRA-related grants for reforestry and conservation-related topics. I don't know them offhand, but I do remember seeing the press release from the governor's office about them. So I'm sure they are working on some of these topics as well.
Yeah, and UH as well. I know that they received a large grant from USDA, actually on carbon smart agriculture. So that's a big one for reducing sink capacity. Reducing some of the sources from agriculture, and then increasing sink capacity in soils.
Great, Thank you so much, Monique and Ron, for addressing the question. Maya, before I move to the virtual and physical rooms, are there any other comments from Facebook? None. Okay, great. I'd like to then move to the physical room. We have an individual in that room. Are there any comments from that individual? None. Okay. I'm going to now open it up to those virtually attending. Any comments or questions for me, Monique or Ron? Please feel free to raise your hand and or unmic. Okay, great. Hearing and seeing none, I just want to again thank you, Monique and Ron, for an excellent presentation. It was just a wealth of knowledge. I think all of us agree that we want to dive further into the deck that you provided us. There may be more follow-up questions that you hear from us later, but thank you for just kind of disclosing this information with the commission and with the public. It just speaks to the transparency that we need to continue to have. With that, I'd like to move on to our next agenda item. We've had the privilege of working with Emma Ticknor in the last 3 weeks. She is an intern with the Climate Change Commission. She comes from Harvard Public Policy. And really what we have asked her to do, kind of expanding on some of the discussions we've had in previous meetings on future topics that we could research as a commission. So we had her address 2 particular areas that we thought were of interest, primarily as it related to what's going on in our community. So expanding upon some of the recommendations that we had highlighted in our recent urban heat paper, and to further kind of dive into some of the efficiency topics that I think Monique and Ron touched upon that we had recommended in our greenhouse gas reduction paper that we published a few years ago. So I'd like to welcome Emma Ticknor, who's going to give an update on that work. Emma, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thanks, Melanie, and thanks everyone for having me. It's been a wonderful month here, and I'm really appreciative for everyone for welcoming me in. I'll go ahead and share my screen and presentation. Okay, everyone good seeing that?
Yeah,
Great.
Yeah, looks great.
Okay. So today I'm going to talk about the risk of increasing heat in Honolulu and then discuss a few mitigation techniques, including resilience hubs, building efficiency, and grid interactive efficient buildings to build on the previous presentation. And then we'll close by looking at a few priority areas around the island where heat risk is greatest. So first, I just want to set sort of a baseline understanding about heat. Heat is the deadliest weather event in the US, and it's particularly relevant here in Honolulu. Caution is recommended from a health perspective when the heat index is above 77 degrees. And in Honolulu, we should expect the temperature to exceed 90 degrees 87 times per year by 2100. Honolulu is also home to several groups that are particularly vulnerable to heat. Native Hawaiians, for example, with strong cultural connections to place may experience mental health burdens from environmental changes. Unhoused people are also at a higher risk since they may be spending more time outside. And then finally, Honolulu sees many tourists who may not be acclimated to the climate. So these population demographics really underscore the urgent need for cooling infrastructure on the island. Next, we'll move into the concept of resilience hubs as a strategy to mitigate heat risk. So cooling centers can provide vital relief during heat waves. These are basically spaces where individuals can cool off, hydrate, and avoid heat-related illnesses. Really just a few hours spent cooling down in air conditioning can prevent heat illness and death. And this is a growing trend among cities that are experiencing increasing heat, like Honolulu. So next, I'll share what some of these other cities are doing to build up their cooling networks. So public buildings like libraries and schools or community organizations like churches can open their doors as cooling centers to help people be safe during heat events. So by partnering with more public and community organizations, Honolulu can expand its cooling center network. And incentivizing that participation, it's helpful to provide the hosts with the goods that are essential for cooling center operations just to minimize the barriers to entry, like providing fans, towels, and water, things like that. This strategy has helped cities like LA to bring more organizations into their network, and same with offering public recognition to the hosts. Private partners can also help expand the network. This might be relevant given the nearby UH infrastructure. Arizona is setting an interesting example by ensuring that people with pets aren't excluded. Pets are often not welcome in libraries or other public cooling centers, and so Arizona is working to include pet shops and vet offices in the network for those pet owners. Denver is another cool example. They've had success in repurposing some abandoned malls there, which may be replicable with any vacant storefronts here around Honolulu. To incentivize private partnerships, really the same, providing those essential goods that we talked about on the previous slide can help, and same with public recognition or offering tax breaks or grants for renovations as well. Another idea coming out of Arizona is an agile cooling infrastructure. So in Arizona, they're repurposing unused infrastructure like shipping containers or buses or mail trucks that are not being used into temporary cooling centers. It's a great idea because these can be moved around to wherever the need is greatest. And it can also be helpful to supplement cooling capacity near trusted community centers. If people flock to a trusted place like a school, for example, during extreme weather, but the school doesn't have air conditioning, then having a mobile cooling center in the parking lot can provide some needed cooling relief. Adding renewables to a cooling center can further expand the value, which is really relevant given Hawaii's clean energy goals. This is where we start to move from the idea of a cooling center to a broader resilience hub. A resilience hub will integrate other services beyond cooling, like backup solar and renewable storage. So we're seeing this combined cooling center plus renewables hub idea work really well throughout the US. In Northern California, New York City, and some cities in the Southeast, public and community buildings like schools and affordable housing complexes and libraries are not only offering cooling center relief, but also building storage and solar in those places to increase the resilience levels. This will help to protect the grid from extra strain, which is common in extreme weather events as everyone is blasting air conditioning if they have it, and to ensure that there's backup power for occupants if the grid were to go down. Again, really important in a cooling center, because if you're welcoming people in for cooling, you want to make sure that you have power to keep them cool. As mentioned, resilience hubs will go beyond just the cooling function, so they can integrate renewables and other community functions like art, education, healing, community or senior centers as well. These two examples show the value of private partnerships in building those really broad integrated resilience networks. The first one in Portland, Oregon, a new hub was built through a partnership between the city, the utility, and then a local university. The community voted actually to place the hub in a particular space on campus where there was Indigenous history. So the goal will be to promote education about that Indigenous history in the new location. And the campus host, they're willing to host because they're benefiting from a public relations boost, additional safety for their students during heat, and then added resilience for their own energy network. The second example I have here is from San Leandro, California, where it's a different model. They haven't built any new infrastructure, but they're expanding the network with existing buildings in the area. They're incentivizing by offering workshops, consulting, and funding to new participants. And by doing that, they've incentivized more than 30 local organizations to open their doors for cooling and for renewables and for these other community functions. So their network now includes religious centers, racial and ethnic community centers, and many more. UH and CCSR have already begun looking into resilience hubs here on the island, and I know the Commission has also recommended advancement of this topic too. In 2023, nearly 900 residents were surveyed for their interest in resilience hubs. This is again not just for cooling, but also for spaces that can become trusted community places for renewables, arts, senior care, or any other community values. So these neighborhoods indicated interest through this survey. So the surveyors were able to identify locations where need and interest were the greatest. So this is a really excellent starting place for work to continue on with. You may be wondering where the money comes from to build one of these things. There are several ways that you can finance a resilience hub. When combined with renewables, hubs can be financed through leasing. So in Florida, for example, over 100 public schools will lease solar to utilities, which helps them avoid upfront costs and to bring in regular revenue for operations as well. And then partnerships with local private organizations like a university or a utility can also help reduce costs, like in the Portland example that we just looked at. And then in California, their major utility is actively funding hubs with grants. There are also a number of grants available for new hubs from state and federal sources, as seen in Michigan and Louisiana. And then finally, a more creative solution could be in offering municipal green bonds, which Toronto, Cape Town, and San Francisco have all initiated. This money can be used for any number of climate topics beyond resilience hubs. And this may be relevant also to the great news that Ben just shared earlier about the new Resilience Fund. One final note on the topic of expanding heat resilience on cooling ordinances. Several cities in the US have started adding cooling to their local ordinances. Chicago, for example, requires landlords to provide cool spaces, just like the lobby or a rec center in a residential building that houses seniors when the temperature gets too hot. And then in Phoenix, New Orleans, and Nevada, there are requirements for indoor temperatures. So landlords have to ensure that residents can stay cool during extreme heat in their buildings. This sort of mandate can really force the expansion of the cooling network. Next, we will move on to building efficiency, which is another great way to address heat risk. Energy efficient buildings are basically less reliant on active cooling, which means that they can stay safer for longer during extreme weather, especially if there's a grid outage or disturbance. This is a great way to address heat equity because people who are disadvantaged are likelier to live in older homes that are harder to cool. Maybe they have older appliances or inefficient building envelopes. So now we'll take a look at how to incentivize this building efficiency and make it happen around the city. Energy efficiency should be appealing to a building owner independently since it will save them money. But the trick is really just communicating out those benefits to make sure that the building owners know. So passive cooling, for example, this is an interesting method where you can cool a space without any power at all. For example, evaporative cooling can cool a building much like how sweat will cool the human body. And this strategy can save up to 80% of cooling costs compared to classic air conditioning. Queensland and Singapore are good examples for how to communicate this upside from the city to the building owners and managers. In Brisbane's subtropical climate, their city council released a design guide about passive cooling. And this is an interesting idea that can build off of Honolulu's work on transit-oriented development. And then in Singapore's hot and humid climate, they released guidelines to encourage efficiency in buildings. And then they also use a green mark scheme where buildings are certified for efficiency. This is a way to sort of enable a financial benefit without costing the city anything because green and environmentally friendly renters might be drawn to a building that's marked with this green mark scheme. And this also connects in a cool way to Hawaii's the State Green Business Program. So it could be a way to connect this from businesses to buildings. Also, just briefly mention a few other incentives that are available around the US for energy efficiency. In Honolulu, it's already possible to get rebates for things like heat pumps, but there are a few strategies that we can explore from other cities as well. Massachusetts, for example, offers financial incentives that are tied to measurable greenhouse gas reductions. Cities like Burbank will incentivize sustainable construction by offering rebates for LEED certification, where a higher level will receive a greater reward. And then another interesting one that I want to call attention to is in Philly and Denver, they're funding air quality improvements for residents with respiratory illnesses, which is a great way to tie together energy and health progress together. New York City will similarly combine energy efficiency with workforce development. So all these examples show how cities are incentivizing efficiency to meet other local needs as well. From the carrots that we just discussed, there are also some sticks that can force buildings towards efficiency. In Hawaii, new state-owned construction must be built to LEED Silver standards, but in Portland and Los Angeles, existing public buildings need to be retrofitted to that same standard, which is sort of a more aggressive version of the ordinance that already exists here. DC does the same with Energy Star standards. Another policy from the UK is in preventing energy efficient buildings from being rented out until they're retrofit to greater efficiency standards. And in France, energy efficiency is really not allowed at all, with retrofits required from poorly rated buildings. So these are all ways to push efficiency with a bit more of a bite than the strategies that we looked at previously. Now we'll talk a bit about grid interactive buildings, or GEBs for short, as a final heat mitigation strategy. This will build on the previous presentation nicely. So from Ron's words, we already know the benefits of GEBs, so I'll move through this quickly and just get to the next page where we'll look at a pilot project from Oakland, California, which can teach us a few lessons about how to execute a pilot project as the team starts to move forward into this space. So in Oakland, a neighborhood was chosen for the pilot after applying for an opportunity notice and receiving a grant from the state. So since receiving that grant over the past few years, 25 residences have undergone retrofits and formed a microgrid within their neighborhood. So the neighborhood is now incredibly energy efficient and also resilient. The key lesson to take away from this example is that choosing the right neighborhood seems like it can really make or break the project. These residents were engaged and they wanted to make it happen, which is really important because residents need to retrofit their homes. They need to be bought into using the appliances and understanding how to use the appliances. They need to welcome electricians into their home to update wiring and things like that. So communication and engagement is really critical. You can see here, there's a photo of a community meeting where residents in Oakland had a chance to voice their opinions and priorities as the pilot proceeded. And then they were also distributing regular infographics to the community to ensure proper use of the retrofitted appliances. Another sort of tip from the Oakland example is that they chose a dense neighborhood where impact would be really concentrated with several homes close together. And then finally, as you can see, patience will be key. This process took nearly 10 years, partially due to a COVID delay. You can see there's a big gap between 2019 and 2023, but patience is going to be key. This is not something that happens overnight. My last note on the GEB strategy is a bit more on communications. You can see on the right side an example of the Oakland Eco Blocks communication with their residents, who again need to be informed every step of the way. And then on the left side, some tools for the buildings to communicate with the grid and with appliances automatically. Residents in Oakland signed on to have their homes tied to the microgrid. So during a load shedding event, buildings will coordinate energy use across devices automatically, whether that's turning down the air conditioning or dimming the lights. And residents have consented to be part of that. So then their buildings will communicate with the grid automatically. We've touched upon some of these already, but a good pilot location is home to folks who want to participate. A dense neighborhood will also help maximize impact. And it's also smart to pick an area with high energy burdens where residents might live in older homes that are inefficient and costly, or with critical infrastructure that you want to protect with resiliency. Lastly, a few ways to finance a GEB project. The Oakland pilot was a combined community ownership model that also received a state grant and support from the local utility. If working with a utility, then ratepayer funded programs are also an option. There's one happening in California, but overall there are many ways to go about piloting and funding a GEB depending on the type of project. My last topic is to talk about heat equity on Oahu. So on this map, Title I schools are marked with blue and black dots. The blue dots will show Title I schools that are located in areas where the heat risk is extreme and where social vulnerability is also high. There are 93 Title I schools on Oahu, and 30 of those are located in areas with both high social vulnerability and also high heat risk. You can see this highlights a few neighborhoods in particular, with Waianae, Nanakuli, Ewa Beach, and the Kalihi areas, all home to Title I schools that serve socially vulnerable populations in some of the hottest places on the island. So this might be some of the good priority areas to target as Honolulu looks to implement resilience hubs or building efficiency or GEB pilots. Digging a little deeper into the Title I school heat risk, we can see that Title I schools are 7% more likely to face high heat risk than non-Title I schools here. 52% of Title I schools are facing high heat risk and only 45% of non-Title I schools. So as I mentioned, this can help illuminate some priority areas for the ongoing heat strategy. This is just a written list of the circled priority areas from the previous map. So we can see again a few neighborhoods that are home to multiple Title I schools that are also facing combined heat risk and social vulnerability. As many of you know, and as there was a comment from a Facebook user, trees are an excellent way to help cool down hot areas and also to practice aloha aina values. So on this map, I've presented tree density with the black diamonds so you can see which areas have fewer trees alongside heat index in red. So many of the areas that are circled here with high heat risk and low tree density are really the same areas that were circled on the last map, particularly Waianae, Nanakuli, Ewa Beach, and Kalihi. So these again might be areas to prioritize for heat strategies, whether it's resilience hubs or tree planting efforts and so on. I'll just wrap up by reiterating my main points from the presentation. Heat is a rising threat here. Adding in more cooling centers or resilience hubs can help protect residents from that risk, as can increasing building efficiency and GEB pilots to increase some of that resilience. And then finally, we just looked at a few neighborhoods in Oahu where heat risk is highest and where these mitigation strategies might have the most impact. Mahalo for your time and attention today, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Great, thank you, Emma, for the great presentation and for really kind of working with us on this sort of expansion of our recommendations that were sort of built in our previous guidance reports. I'm particularly interested in the mobile cooling centers that Arizona has. I think it's an interesting use of sort of, a temporary facilities that we have a lot of here in Hawaii and Honolulu, and just given our sort of landfill challenges. So I'd be curious to sort of see how that kind of ties in with our next presenter in terms of solutions. And I think the Oakland Eco Block is just a really great example as well too of communities sort of setting forth efficiency and renewable sort of targets. And lastly, I think that recommendation on just showing the relationships, right, between heat risk and inequities. From a sort of architect standpoint, I just sort of want to highlight that perhaps, when we start to see new developments occurring, particularly those in kind of the Kalihi, Kapalama area, we can kind of build in more requirements on how do we sort of address mitigation and adaptation at that point. So it was a great ways and a great sort of starting point for us to further look into which topics we particularly want to dive in further as a commission. So thank you again for just making that time to do this work with us.
Yeah.
I want to sort of just any comments responses before I go to the next commissioners? Okay, great. So I just want to sort of open it up to commissioners, any comments or questions for Emma before we go over to the public. Kiana.
I don't have any really substantial comments. I just wanted to thank Emma so much for her time with us, and she's been such a pleasure to have. She was based out of my office, so I got to know Emma really well, and I just wanted to say thank you for all of your hard work and being so diligent with all of your questions and with your research. I'm particularly interested in the Title I research. I know this is all things sort of that came out of our recommendations in our urban heat guidance document. And that was one of them, was to sort of identify where we should prioritize cooling in terms of where Title I schools are relative to things like canopy cover, as well as whether these schools have air conditioned access or not. So I think this is really great to have a list. And this is something we can try to utilize as a commission when we write testimony, or we can think of something else. But thank you so much, Emma.
Yeah, and thank you, Kiana, for hosting me in your office and for welcoming me and getting me up to speed on everything.
Great. Commissioner Olson.
Just also big mahalo. This was very rich. It was a rich report. It's amazing what you accomplished in a month. So congratulations on that. And I look forward to digging into some of the results that you just presented. Mahalo.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Olson. I want to turn it over to comments from the public. Maya has shared we have a public comment from Andy Bates. Andy, if you are, I don't know where you are, but if you could unmute or share, that'd be great.
I'm in your office.
Oh, great.
I just wanted to make a comment about the presentation that Emma just gave. I actually volunteer for Meals on Wheels and deliver food to seniors who are frequently, as you mentioned, in an overheated situation, but unable to move because they can't leave their house. And so just a thought about the cooling issue, that it probably has to be or should be linked to some kind of transportation process, and also what the Meals on Wheels people call a wellness check to see how they're doing with heat and in the area, and they're what I call vulnerable populations, to the very insightful presentation that you just made. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I actually used to volunteer with Meals on Wheels growing up, and it's a wonderful organization that fills a really real need. Also, your points about mobility for seniors is really important. I think the mobile transportation, the mobile cooling unit is a really great way to do that, to move like a trailer or a bus near where seniors are living to provide them with cooling. And then another interesting thing that I'll call out from Arizona they have a partnership with utilities where if there's a grid outage, then the utility will be on the hook for providing transportation for seniors in the affected area to the nearest cooling center. So that's just sort of a comment from what we're seeing around the US related to what you shared. But thank you for your comment.
Great. Thank you, Andy Bates. I want to turn it over to Facebook Live. Maya, do we have anything on Facebook Live?
Yeah.
None. Great. Okay. Turning it over to our virtual room. Any comments, questions? Great. Seeing none, hearing none. Again, Emma, I just want to thank you for all the great work. It was such a pleasure to work with you. I know we all sort of appreciated your hard work. So we do hope to keep in touch with you and to hear your journey as you move through. But thank you again. Please feel free to continue joining our meeting and offer your comments as we move through the agenda. I'm going to move on to our next topic, item number 7, which is a presentation on Cool Oahu and our heat mortality study by Alexander Yee from the Office of Climate Change and Sustainability and Resiliency. Hi, Alex. Welcome. Thank you for joining us.
Aloha. Mahalo for the opportunity to share our work with you. And let me just share my screen. Are we seeing that now?
Yes, thank you.
Yes.
Okay, great. So mahalo again for the opportunity to present to this commission. My name is Alex Yee, and I work for the Office of Climate Change, Sustainability, and Resiliency. And presenting with me today is our Climate Adaptation Fellow, Claire Rossi de Leon. It's really a privilege to present on the work that our office has been doing related to heat, particularly given that this commission adopted its urban heat guidance a year ago in January 2024. So we're excited to share the overlap between our work and the guidance that you provided. So today what we want to do primarily is give just a little bit of background on heat as a concern for Oahu. We're going to share some data and outputs from 2 recent projects that we completed or are in the late stages of completing, and then we'll talk a little bit about some next steps for increasing heat resilience here on Oahu. Okay, so as I mentioned, one thing that we really wanted to do was tie our work back to the urban heat guidance that this commission adopted a year ago. And in particular, I know that the guidance document contained 7 high-level recommendations, each with their own sub-recommendations and more specific actions. I wanted to highlight for you today the 3 high-level recommendations that we're going to touch on today in our work. And those would be the ones related to public education and outreach, heat information, and data. So before we proceed any further, I want to just introduce a couple of terms that we use in our heat work. The first being heat mitigation. So this relates to all of the strategies, everything that we can do to help address the issue of the urban heat island effect, which is the effect of urban spaces, intensely urbanized places, tending to get hotter and hold on to heat more than surrounding greener areas. And the reason for this is, of course, because we know that a lot of the materials that we build urban spaces out of, concrete, asphalt, tend to absorb and hold on to heat. And so the things that we can do to mitigate the urban heat island effect fall into this category of heat mitigation. In contrast, there's another term that we use called heat management. And this is in response to the fact that we know that heat isn't just a stress, it's also manifests as a shock. And so acute heat events, heat waves, often require emergency management response. And so the ways that we manage those acute events fall under the umbrella of heat management. And so these are terms that we'll use, and I think it's important to understand, that there are multiple sides and that the stakeholders relevant for each type of action are going to look different. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Claire.
All right, thank you, Alex. So is heat a concern for Oahu? We all know the answer to this, but I'll just share some more details. And thank you, Emma, for providing a great intro to our presentation. So although Oahu is not reaching triple-digit temperatures like many places on the mainland, heat is definitely still a risk here due to our high humidity levels, as we can see in the heat index chart on the screen. So heat index is a measure of what the temperature feels like to the human body when we combine relative humidity, which we have here on the y-axis, and temperature on the x-axis. And this slide shows temperatures from October of 2023. This week didn't break any records, but still reached dangerously high levels. Next slide. Another issue that we wanted to bring up is the topic of marine heat waves. So in Hawaii, we are not only susceptible to terrestrial heat waves, but also marine heat waves. The example on the screen is from 2019. This marine heat wave developed in the Pacific, setting over 300 temperature records between May and September. And a big problem with marine heat waves is that they can persist for much longer than your standard terrestrial heat wave. In this case, in 2019, it was a 5-month-long extreme heat event. And 2019 remains the hottest year ever recorded in Honolulu. Coincidentally, in 2019, CCSR undertook a heat mapping exercise, and we're probably all familiar with it, but I just wanted to mention it just in case. So for this heat mapping exercise, volunteers traversed 10 areas across Oahu and collected measurements of temperature and humidity, as you can see in the diagram here. The record high temperature for Honolulu was 95 degrees, and the maximum heat index was 107.3. From these measurements, our office produced the first ever community heat map for Oahu. And this served as the foundation for a lot of our other work. Moving into 2024, our team is excited to share some outputs and findings from Keep Cool Oahu. So this is a project that we've been working on for the past 2 years with the help of some consultants at G70. So some of the components of Keep Cool Oahu, it started with a heat analysis and assessment for Oahu. This included a community survey, and it was all of this research was compiled into a white paper that was provided to us. The second component is cooling center research and a draft MOU that whenever the city decides to create cooling centers, we'll have this MOU ready. The third component is the development of a public service campaign on heat, which includes an outreach strategy, content development, communications toolkit, and a dissemination plan. And all of this is currently being compiled into a final report. So similar to what Emma just shared, in this project, we determined some focus communities. In our case, we overlaid the social vulnerability index with the afternoon heat index. And we determined 3 areas that we wanted to focus on for this project. So we determined Kalihi, Waipahu, and Waianae, where were going to be our focus communities. So in these 3 communities, we did a community heat survey, and we received 223 responses. The average level of concern by adult respondents was 7.9 out of 10, which is fairly striking, very high, especially considering the fact that heat isn't often seen as a big problem in Hawaii. But this shows that people are experiencing the impacts, especially in these communities. The top sources of information about heat events are social media and online news, which is really important if we're planning a heat outreach campaign to kind of consider this. And then finally, during heat events, most respondents prefer to shelter in place, followed closely by going to the beach or the pool. All right, so some of the, well, I just wanted to share some of the outreach materials that we have compiled quickly. So this first one is our Shishi chart, just a way to remind people if they're drinking enough water, kind of a fun way to remind people as dehydration can often lead to heat illness. Next slide. This slide shows a bus placard that will be going up in our buses in April 2026. We're excited about that. And, you know, it's pretty basic messaging of drink water, bring your own shade, and learn the signs and symptoms of heat illness. Next slide. We've also created a postcard that we are hoping to mail out to residents in our 3 focus communities. And again, kind of reinforcing how do you respond to the signs of heat illness. Next slide. We have a pamphlet here, which includes some heat safety tips, again, signs of heat illness. One thing I wanted to mention about the pamphlet is that this is our general pamphlet, but we've also created several pamphlets specifically for vulnerable populations. So we've been working with IHS to develop a pamphlet specifically for the unsheltered population with some heat safety tips that are perhaps more relevant to that particular population. Same with our Kupuna population. We've developed a pamphlet for them, and then we have a flyer specifically for pregnant people as well. So finally, all of our outreach materials are currently being translated into 4 languages. So we don't have those materials yet, but we will in the next few months. And I just wanted to share a little sneak peek of what's to come. Here are the slogans in Tagalog and Ilocano that will be featured on all of those materials. And with that, I'll pass it back to Alex to discuss the heat mortality study.
Hello, Claire. So the next project that we are excited to share is a heat mortality study that we completed last year with the help of some partners at Urban Adapt. So the reason that we decided to undertake a heat mortality study is that heat is actually the most deadly weather phenomenon. And so we think that, you know, it's important to understand the potential for the human health impacts of heat on Oahu as a way to highlight the human impacts of heat. It's not just an abstract and uncomfortable phenomenon, but it can be a public safety risk as well. So a little bit about the study. The objective was to identify the value and potential of certain heat mitigation efforts on reducing heat mortality. We started by creating a model of Oahu's urban heat island, which I described earlier. And then using that model, we went about trying to demonstrate and quantify the potential benefits of various types of interventions on heat mitigation, such as vegetation or reflective surfaces. And then understanding where in particular on the island that would result in the biggest increases in, or decreases rather, in heat mortality. And then it also is helping us to identify areas that are disproportionately vulnerable to heat on Oahu. So again, heat mortality is this important indicator for heat because it's typically higher in urban areas or areas that are vulnerable to the urban heat island effect. And as I mentioned earlier, heat mitigation strategies are strategies that can help us reduce the urban heat island effect, which means that if we can identify areas where heat mortality is high and demonstrate the value of tools that we already know about to reduce the urban heat island effect in those areas, we can potentially decrease the heat mortality on the island. And so in this study, heat mortality is really the intersection between heat-driven exposure and social vulnerability. And I'll talk a little bit more about that when we get to the results page. So The first step, as I mentioned, was to create this base scenario. So this represents present day conditions in the urban district across the island. I want to note just a couple of things on this slide. In the top right, you'll see all of the different inputs. So this was created using land cover data. And so all of the land cover within the urban district of the island was divided into 100 by 100 meter grid cells and then characterized based on their percentages of those inputs that you see in the top right corner, whether it's tree canopy, concrete, roads, rooftop, etc. Something that I think is a good takeaway from looking at this map as a whole is that exposure to heat varies across the island. And so this is a hazard that is going to impact different people differently. And even within neighborhoods, due to the variation in intensity of urbanization, as well as local climatic conditions, there can be variation. And I think it's important to note also as we look at this map that a change in temperature of even a few degrees can have significant impacts on human health and AC use and energy demand, right? Just a few degrees can make a big difference. And so zooming in, this is a map of some of the max temperatures, and we can see that they're driven by, as can be expected, exposure to solar radiation, and also the prevalence of certain impervious surfaces like asphalt and roofs. And so what we see here in areas with high impervious percentages, like the industrial neighborhoods of Iwilei, Kalihi Kai, and the airport and the runways, we see high maximum temperatures. And then in this slide, looking at minimum temperatures, we see a key feature of urban heat island effect, which is warm nights. So warm nights or high minimum temperatures are important because they have health implications. Our bodies need to be able to cool down at some point. Prolonged exposure to heat is what really drives the risk of heat illness. And so you can see if we sort of go back and forth between the max and the min, I want to draw your attention to Waikiki, which doesn't show up as having high maxes. And this may be because of the prevalence of high rises that provide a lot of shade to the streets. But you can see that they do still have high minimum temperatures. And this is a reflection of the fact that the materials that are being used in that highly urbanized environment are not releasing, or they're still releasing heat into the environment into the night. So it's a telltale indicator for an urban heat island. So we just presented and saw the base case, which is our current conditions. In addition, we built off of that base case to understand the value and potential of these different heat mitigation strategies. So we modeled an additional 7 scenarios that you can see listed here that range from more green and tree related scenarios like street trees of different percentages, 30%, 50%, to reflective surfaces like cool roofing and cool pavement. The stormwater greening scenario is really looking at the co-benefits of if we were to increase the amount of trees and green infrastructure. Can we also understand the reduction in stormwater runoff? So we have that data as well. We thought that this commission might appreciate a small note on the methodology here. So this slide just gives a little bit of insight on how we determined those target values in the scenarios I showed on the slide before. So for example, like how did we come to 30% as our definition of moderate greening? So basically the answer is that we used data from the base case to inform our targets. So to answer the question I just posed, for moderate greening, we determined that to be 30% because we found that to be the mean vegetation or the mean tree canopy for neighborhoods across the island. And so for us, this was like an opportunity to explore an environmental justice scenario. What would it look like if all of the neighborhoods on the island were brought up to just the average amount of tree canopy on the island? Similarly, the tree loss scenario is informed by our current rate of tree loss. Yes, on Oahu, year over year, we are losing urban canopy. And so this number of 27.4% loss is what our current rate of tree loss would look like in 2050. So we've modeled that as well. A couple of notes about this model. We're really trying to understand the potential and value for these heat mitigation approaches. So generally, this represents, the ideal scenarios if we had the resources available. It's not, necessarily an indication of what the city can do with its current resources or what we're necessarily proposing as a specific plan of action. That being said, we really see value in highlighting co-benefits when we talk about climate adaptation. So in this case, the co-benefit that we're highlighting for these heat mitigation approaches is the human health and public safety benefits. We think that, talking about the lives that we can save by investing in a robust urban canopy, this helps us to build coalitions of support to potentially unlock other sources of funding, et cetera. So these are just a couple of examples from the results. So we do have island-wide maps for each of those 7 scenarios. We're just going to show you a selected couple of those scenarios, and they're zoomed in to a more legible scale, but we do have the whole island. Here, this is the moderate greening or the 30% greening scenario. And what we can see here is a reduction in temperature from expanding the tree canopy. And we saw this reduction in 43 out of the 128 neighborhoods across the island that we studied. High temperatures were found to decrease by more than 2 degrees Fahrenheit across city neighborhoods with the greatest expansion in tree canopy. And then on the reflective surfaces side, we chose this slide. We can see a temperature reduction from cool roofing, most heavily concentrated in areas, surprise, surprise, with the highest building density or extensive flat roofs in industrial zones. For this scenario, the high temperatures were found to decrease by more than 3% across city blocks. And a quick note on some of the numbers that drove our cool roofing scenario. We took the solar reflectance index from the latest energy code. So this is sort of meant to be a scenario that looks at by 2050, what will it look like if we're building new roofs to the current code, which we thought was exciting and a good way to build off of the work that's happening from folks that presented earlier. So this is the example, or the results slide for our heat mortality by neighborhood. As a reminder to that earlier Venn diagram, heat mortality is the intersection between heat exposure, so from those scenarios, and social vulnerability. So you saw that social vulnerability on slides that Claire and Emma presented. It's something that our office created a while back and continues to serve as a foundation for our work. The model, as I mentioned, works on 100 by 100 meter grid cell, but the heat mortality is reported out by neighborhood so that the city can prioritize outreach and resource allocation. So this can help to drive as well the communication dissemination that Claire talked about. And then the other thing I want to just say on this is that because heat mortality is driven by both heat exposure and social vulnerability, there were neighborhoods that had maybe medium high heat exposure in the scenario results, but high social vulnerability, and so they ended up having high heat mortality. And an example of that would be Nu'uanu, actually. We are working on compiling the results from this heat mortality study into a story map that we're about to publish. And so stay tuned for the publication of all of this data. We know that this is a slightly technical topic and that there's a lot of data, a lot of scenarios, a lot to understand. So we really thought that a story map with the ability to present this data in a sort of narrative structure would be really helpful for the public to really understand what they're looking at. So we're really excited to release this soon. And then for next steps, we are looking forward to getting back all of the translations of the materials that Claire talked about and starting on the distribution for that heat education campaign. The publication of this heat mortality story map, as I mentioned, all of the materials will be hosted on a new heat webpage on the resilientoahu.org website. And that's where, the QR code in all of the communication materials will point. And then we're in the early stages of talking more close and working more closely with the city's Department of Emergency Management on moving forward recommendations on the heat management side for shock events. But we are excited just through the development of, for example, the pamphlet targeted toward houseless communities to already have started and be building relationships with direct service providers that will be key partners for the city in these situations. And we're encouraged by collaboration with others, such as the State Department of Health, who has their climate change and health HUI that we've been participating in, and the synergies between our work and work on energy efficiency as demonstrated through, the mapping of the potential for reflective roofs, for example. So I'm going to leave it there and look forward to any questions from the commissioners. Mahalo.
Great, Alex and Claire. This is such great information and just it's a great sort of segue from all the topics we've been talking about. In the interest of time, I just want to highlight what you pointed out, co-benefits. So when we look at how our city continues to evolve, because a lot of these is really about how we synergize mitigation and adaptation into our built environment. So I just press to the commission and to our city as we look at, we have some similar priority areas, particularly Ivalule. These are all TOD areas. Look at ways in which we can kind of build in some of these co-benefits that we were talking about in this meeting and in our subsequent papers. So I want to pass it on to the other commissioners to see if they have any comments and questions. We are at 10:53. I am going to do a time check after this agenda item, but I want to respect the work that Alex and Claire shared with us, open up to commissioners and then to the public. Brad, Commissioner Romine.
Yeah, just real quickly, want to thank Alex and Claire for their work on this topic. I mean, what's more important than health and safety and concerns about mortality? So it's really great that you're doing this work and keeping this topic at the forefront and building on the work we did together on the guidance documents. So thank you. I'll keep it short there. Pass it on to the other commissioners that might have questions or comments too.
Great, thank you, Commissioner Ryan. Let's go to Vice Chair Osuka and then to Commissioner Olson.
Yep, mine are really quick. I just want to thank you both for the presentation and tell you I love the Shishi pamphlet. I think it's important that we are sort of translating these really technical materials into something that's locally appropriate, but two, something that's easy to understand. So I think having the comparison between sort of like locals, like snacks, like Lily Koi Shape Ice, I thought was really cute and very impactful. And I just also want to highlight how valuable and how important I think it is that you folks are translating your materials. So I just want to applaud you folks for taking that step. That's all. Thank you.
Yeah, similarly, excellent work. Thank you so much. Really important. I had one technical question. So obviously, heat mortality is the most devastating consequence of heat exposure. But morbidity would also be really potentially interesting to look at. So does the model offer the ability, or do you think it would just be highly correlated with the mortality, and so focusing efforts in those areas? Or is morbidity more tied to kind of work environments, sectors, et cetera? I don't know. Could you comment a little bit on that?
Yes, mahalo for that question, Commissioner. The study that we did with Urban Adapt was enabled by a curve that was specific to the city of Honolulu. So there are different curves for each city that show the sensitivity of that population to, a marginal increase in temperature. And that specific curve was between average air temperature and heat mortality. I think because we've already done the work of modeling average air temperatures and modeling the potential temperature reductions of different heat mitigation strategies, if we were to have access to another curve that showed the relationship between average air temperature and heat morbidity, we could certainly build on the modeling and not need to recreate any of that. So I think that's an exciting next area of exploration for this work, and certainly something that we can build off of the existing work that had been done. So thank you for that question.
Mahalo.
Great. Thank you, commissioners. I want to ask if there are any comments from the public in our virtual, physical, and Facebook groups. Maya says none. I see none. So again, Alex and Claire, I just want to thank you for this great presentation. I think we all look forward to the work that you're going to publish on the Resiliencies website. I think we'll be in touch with trying to connect further. But thank you again for sharing this great information. I want to do a time check. We are at 10:57. We have previously scheduled our meeting from 9 to 11. We have about 5 other items, really 2 critical items that I'd like us to talk about. I just want to ask commissioners if you have availability to extend for at least another 15, 20 minutes at the most. Okay, I'm seeing head nods. Yes, we're good. Okay, great. Given that, I would like to move over to item number 8, which is an update on our in-draft guidance document on tourism and climate change. I'd like to open it up to our 2 commissioners, Vice Chair Osuka and Commissioner Olson, who have current ownership and authorship of this paper to kind of share light on the current status.
Okay, I'm happy to jump in for us. It's still very much in draft. Where we had sat down prior to the holidays to try to build a timeline, which proved to be a little ambitious given holidays and a number of other commitments that both of us had. So we will, we're kind of proposing that we work this spring, bring a draft. Hold on, let me pull up the what we've discussed. We'll bring a draft sometime in May is what we're proposing. Then have a public outreach June, July with a final guidance document in August. So that's our proposed new timeline that we will hold ourselves to. Yeah. Kiana, do you have or Commissioner Otsuka, do you have anything to add?
Oh, just that we're sort of working on our first round of internal edits that we want to make. We weren't the original authors of the document. So I know both of us really want to work on some internal stuff before we go and do formal stakeholder engagement. So we can bring that version to the commission for review before going to formal stakeholder engagement, or we can just bring you it at the very end, whatever our preferences are.
And I can pick up briefly as well on something Commissioner raised about the air emissions. That this is, I just started digging into that and reading through the background material. And there's significant work out there that does do these footprint analyses in rigorous ways. So I think I've really got some technical digging in to do. And we'll circle back to get some suggestions for methodologies in literature, drawing on my environmental engineering background as well here, digging back into that. So I recognize that, you know, there are some places where there probably need to be some significant revisions. I don't know if this is the appropriate time to bring up the testimony that, you know, we received as well. So just I'm thankful for having received some testimony from a member of the public, and with some specific critiques of the current draft document, which I'll take very seriously and bring into our review and edits moving forward. I haven't had time to dig in deeply to those, but certainly will.
Great, thank you, Commissioner Olson and Otsuka. I do want us to address sort of Dr. Keeney's testimony, and thank you, Commissioner Olson, for bringing it up. I don't have a preference if you want to present a draft prior to going to public outreach. I guess my only comment is if there are substantial changes, it might be good to preview that with the commission prior. So that's my thought. I'm open to hear other thoughts from the other commissioners on that process. But I do welcome and appreciate the timeline on just, you know, completing our study on this topic. Commissioner Ryan, I don't want to put you on the spot, but do you have a preference if they present a draft prior, or we can just leave it up to the two commissioners to decide and we can kind of schedule accordingly from there?
Yeah, I don't have a preference there. Happy to follow.
Okay, sounds good. I just wanted to, you know, out of respect. Okay, so I guess Commissioner Vice Chair Otsuka and Commissioner Olson, let us know how your progress goes, and then coordinate with me on whether or not you would like to present a draft prior to doing your outreach, so we can kind of get it on the agenda. But to that note, I do want to tie in the testimony from Dr. Keeney. He is still online. So Dr. Keeney, I just want to sort of give you a moment to kind of share your testimony, and then to also provide any additional comment to what Commissioner Olson had responded to. So if you would like to unmic yourself, that would be great.
Thank you. I don't have any prepared comments. I do appreciate recognition that it's a very complex subject area, and I appreciate Kristen, your offer to delve more deeply into it. I think the deeper we go, the more that we will see how complex it is. And so thank you for your work on that. I have nothing else to add at this point. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Dr. Keeney. Before we move on to the next topic, any questions from the public regarding the status of our in-draft guidance document? All right, we have none from Maya. I see no hands in our virtual room. So I want to move on to item number 9, which is a discussion on our next meeting dates. So the Resilience Office has helped sort of coordinate our next meeting date. And so we have secured March 7th from 9 to 11 a.m. I just want to confirm that that still works for our commissioners. Okay, great. I'm hearing some head nods. So you should have those meeting holds in your calendar. The next thing I actually want to talk about is what we had brought up in our last 2 meetings and a pledge that we had made in 2023, which was trying to work to getting an in-person meeting. So we've had some discussion with the office on this, and currently right now we're discussing doing our first in-person meeting in April. One, to align with Earth Month, but also just kind of align with some of the vulnerabilities that we had talked about and presented in this meeting here. But the current proposal is to do an in-person meeting in the Waianae community to align with their neighborhood board meeting, which currently is the first Tuesday of every month. So that would be April 1st. And their meetings are typically 6 p.m. Our proposal right now, which I want to hear thoughts on from our commission, is to have our commission meeting prior to the neighborhood board meeting. And so that would be at a 5 o'clock, 5:30. And so the intent right now is, if we were to have that meeting, is to sort of focus on sharing some of the hazards in that community from a sort of a climate standpoint, and then to talk about some discussions about just their concerns and additional programs and support that we could provide or guidance. So I want to open it up to thoughts from our commissioners on one, the potential of having an in-person meeting, the location, and then also the date, the topic. So feel free to unmic.
Sorry,
Commissioner
Chair,
Romine?
real quick, I was looking at the calendar and missed the location that you proposed. Can you say
No
that again?
problem. I ran through it. We're proposing to do it in the Waianae community, so it would be at Waianae District Park.
Sounds great to me. Thanks.
Vice Chair Osuka?
I just want to clarify that the Waianae Neighborhood Board meeting is typically held the first Tuesday of the month at 6:30 p.m. And I think we would ideally like to meet from 5 to 6 to give the Neighborhood Board Commission a half-an-hour buffer between our two meetings. So the proposal is Tuesday, April 1st at 5 p.m. at the Waianae District Park.
Yeah. Thank you, Vice Chair Osuka. So it generally seems like this could be a great thing that we could do. So if I hear no opposition, we will continue to coordinate with the Resiliency Office. Director Sullivan has been helpful to sort of assist us with that. And we will send out, for now, a placeholder for a 5 o'clock start, and then work to discuss the agenda in our subsequent meeting. So any comments or thoughts you'd like to share, Director Sullivan, since the coordination of an in-person meeting does require some assistance from your team?
Oh, no, we really appreciate, Chair, the effort that the commission is making to get out to the community and to follow through on the equity pledge, and we think it's really important. Myself and Deputy Director Fox did have a conversation with the Neighborhood Commission office and confirmed that they were supportive, very supportive of the idea. And, one of the important aspects for us is to be able to have the technical capacity to both have an in-person and virtual meeting, and they assured us that that was something that they were happy to accommodate. So we do have some other follow-ups to do, including with Parks and Recreation on the availability of the space prior, because again, it is a space that is used by the public a lot, and a few other items. But now that you've given us some additional direction and we got that initial confirmation from NCO, we're happy to do that and get back to you as soon as we can.
Excellent. Thank you, Director Sullivan and Deputy Director Fox, for the coordination work. I'm honestly really glad we can make this happen. And so I look forward to our April meeting. With that said, I want to just kind of zoom through item number 10. Aside from the testimony that we received from Dr. Heaney, are there any other communications or correspondence from the public, those in the room, virtually or in person? Seeing and hearing none, I want to move on to item number 11, public inputs, matters that are not on the agenda. Seeing and hearing none, I think we're on our last topic, which is announcements. The only other announcement that I want to provide is really just a reminder to the commissioners, if you haven't done so already, finish your ethics annual disclosure. I believe Director Sullivan sent out a reminder on January 11. So if you haven't done so already, please do that. Commissioners, any announcements that you'd like to make? Great. Any announcements from our public? Okay, great. With that, our meeting is done. We have completed our agenda with some time to spare from the additional time I had added. So thank you everyone. So it's such a rich discussion. I look forward to seeing everyone on the 7th of March. I'd like to call this meeting to an end at 11:09. Enjoy the rest of your week. Bye.
Hi, all.
Chair. Thanks so much for
everybody.
Thank you,
appreciate it.
Chair.